Sorry about that last glitch. Back to our PowerPoint. Okay, as I was saying about uh, Dallas Willard and the spiritual formation movement, the celebration of discipline is foundational work. And Dallas Willard was a contemporary of the author of Richard Foster's Celebration and Discipline. Um, you know, denominationally, you may not agree with everything in that, but I encourage you. It is a classic read, and it can be transformational for you. Okay, so I hope you get a chance to read the introduction, the foreword, and the prologue. Ortberg talks about his experience with Dallas Willard as a young man in the ministry. And of course, Dallas Willard was a spiritual giant. And of course, he talked about wanting to really impress Dallas. And he visited him in his modest home in Box Canyon. And the beautiful thing about Dallas Willard was he saw people through God's eyes. Didn't matter where you came from, what your education level was, or what your accomplishments were. He looked at the person and their spiritual journey and where they were in their own growth. So he tells the story of Dallas actually doing some mentoring of, I believe the guy was a truck driver, may have been a construction worker, welcomed him into his home just the same as Ortberg. And this home was so modest that this blue collar guy went home and told his wife, "Hey, I met somebody with worse furniture than ours." So yeah, so he really did live the practice of simplicity, which is one of the disciplines. The story of the stream is in conjunction with the story of our spiritual life. So it's this kind of a parable of a caretaker of a stream and a mountain village, and clearing away debris and actually tending to keeping the purity of the stream. And of course, politicians being what they are, the town council says, "Why are we spending this money keeping this guy working on this? Let's put our money elsewhere." And so, as with our spiritual lives left untended, yeah, we can kind of go on some momentum, but eventually limbs fell into the stream further up the mountain. Impurities got in, sediment, silt, and the water became undrinkable and brackish. And so also, like politicians, they kind of backpedaled and said, "Oh, well, maybe we should have him do that." And just like our spiritual lives, it wasn't an immediate bounce back. The stream took time to be restored. So you know, so hopefully that helps you to see the importance of ongoing internal work, not just a ritual, but relationship. Okay, and then in the introduction, there's the story of a visit to a mental hospital. And just like we have with students, we have case discussions. And so they talked about this lady and how well she was doing and how she was responding. She was owning her part in her problems. She was acting on the help and care and doing her homework in her therapy and making some remarkable improvement. And then they talked about a lady named Maddie, and I don't know if she's mad, as in angry, but what was said about this lady was that she was continually complaining, blame shifting, and something that was said that was really profound about this lady is that Maddie has no interest in her interior, in having an interior life. That's kind of that's kind of shocking, and that's really what happens if we do not attend to our interior life and our relationship with God. We end up in the same situation, and we end up being no help to others and to ourselves without inviting God. This is kind of where I talk about inviting God into the basement, your dark corners, really having the courage to look at what God is shining his light on and submitting yourself to his will to allow him the space to transform instead of launching into reasons why, but just being obedient. This is one of those quotes that Dallas Willard shared when Ortberg came to visit him. And of course, he wants to impress Dallas. He wants to, be a high achiever, all of these things. And so he goes to talk with him again. And he says, okay, so yeah, I get it. Slow down, connect with God. What else? What else? And so Dallas says, hurry is the great enemy of spiritual life in our day. You must ruthlessly eliminate hurry from your life. How many of us do that? What's happening to the generations behind me and the generations coming up with hurry? Focused concentration is almost unheard of, and that is what is required for God to be able to go down into your basement and shine the light on things. And so what he says to Ortberg is, the most important thing in your life is not what you do, it's who you become. Those are not easy words to hear if you're driven to achieve and succeed. We were made to love God and one another. The ultimate goal is to be transformed day by day into the image of Christ. Yes, numbers matter in reaching out to people, but it is God who does the winning of souls and the fundraising and all of these other things. We are merely instruments for his use. And here's a big quote you're going to see a lot. Might find it in the quiz. Self-awareness isn't selfish. So this soul-keeping book is a step in the right direction to become more self-aware, to ask yourself the hard questions. I can share other things with you as well. Enneagram is a personality inventory that rose out of the spiritual formation movement and the monastic movement. Don't let that deter you. It's actually the type of tool that I use for this is research-based, and what it does is actually get at motivation and look at our sin nature as well as our gifting. So, I tell my students, well, Enneagram is what Myers-Briggs wants to be when it grows up. And Myers-Briggs is a personality inventory that's been around for years and is used by businesses. I had to take it when I went to seminary. So yeah, but Enneagram takes it to the next level. Okay, yeah, so let's talk about defense mechanisms. These are the strategies that we use to help us with our pain. A lot of times as children, sometimes we have to have them. Sometimes as adults, they're necessary for our survival, emotionally, even physically. However, holding on to them beyond the danger becomes a barrier to connection and intimacy. This is a fancy name, reaction formation. It's a kind of defense mechanism that actually causes a person to do the opposite of what they're feeling. So, so let's say somebody at the office hurt your feelings. And you're going, I'm going to be a good Christian. And you actually go overboard in being extra nice and extra accommodating. So what you see is there's a lack of truthfulness in your behavior and your internal world. Repression, you've heard of this one. It's where we push away a painful or disturbing thought, and we push away something that's uncomfortable and unpleasant and try to go back to a happy place. Identification. This is one that you probably see a lot. It's where the person adapts to or is a chameleon in whatever person they're with. I've got a husband who's in the process of a divorce right now. He said that his wife, he was a solid Christian, but his wife, she was right alongside with him in their small group leading and all these other things that they did. They talked about doing, social justice work, all kinds of things like that. And when they separated, she went and began living the opposite way. All of the things that she said that she believed. So, and it turns out she's seeing somebody else. And guess what they are involved in? Not ministry in the church. So, introjection. Now, this is one that's really kind of, it doesn't make a lot of sense, but you probably, if you think about it, you may know someone, who knows, maybe you yourself have done this. So when faced with some type of painful situation, you actually take it in, you identify with it, you become it. So you are a person that's sort of into being an Eeyore. Oh, the world's so terrible. Oh, it's so awful. How horrible. You over-identify with it and you kind of make that a part of yourself. Isolation, dangerous territory. What happens to the one sheep that leaves the fold? They become a target of the enemy. So isolation is where I just cut off someone else, or I cut off my own feelings. I don't see myself as a whole person. I'm like, okay, that's my work life. That's my spiritual life. That's my emotional life. That's my relational life. And you isolate within yourself. Projection. This is one I'm really good at. What happened to that book? One of those interns has taken my book. When in fact, I'm the one that's been careless and carried it off somewhere and don't remember where I put it. So we project what we dislike about ourselves onto somebody else. Rationalization. Wow. Here's one that we probably wouldn't know how to function if we didn't use. And this is why I say this is an ongoing work, a lifetime of looking inward, the internal life. Rationalization. So that's when we kind of make up good reasons for doing something that we've done that's not good. You know, we say, well, yeah, you know, I said a curse word at that guy at the stoplight, but I was under a lot of stress. Okay. Denial. This is where you actually just say, oh, that's not true. That doesn't exist. You've got some sort of anxiety, some kind of unpleasant thing you're facing, and you say, oh no, you know, that's my house isn't burning. Oh, you know, it'll be fine. Narcotization, and that doesn't just mean substances or alcohol. We can use other things to help numb ourselves. If you've ever put a song on pause, it's kind of like putting your life on pause while you're carried into some other numbing out of what you're feeling. If it's too big, it's like, oh, I don't feel that. You actually just totally numb it out. Okay. So those defense mechanisms, we have turned to every one of them at some point, although part of the work of the soul, part of the soul keeping is identifying which one you tend to use as a favorite over and over. That's part of your work. Now, as we go into the soul keeping, we've got to bear in mind that there are two worlds that we navigate. We navigate those who know God and those who don't. And that can be people in our own churches. And we know that that is going to be an opposing force in our lives, in the spiritual realm. And it's kind of sobering to really think about how extensive that is. Some of you who've done some ministry in different places, you know that there's a lot of darkness out there. I will say that on whatever side you stand with the same-sex attraction, homosexuality, I've got Christian therapists who hold to the belief that this is not of God. I am not going to participate in this. They say, well, you know, if a gay couple comes to me, I'm going to refer them out. Okay. Our professional journal a few years back actually took the rationale for a lot of these options that Christian therapists use to try to be ethical, and they've accused them of being unethical and ignorant. So where we know and love God and serve him, and he is a part of our life, he is a part of who we are, he is in us and with us, they see it as an ignorant superstition that we need to be educated out of. And so it's shocking, the lack of recognition of something so precious. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff working against us out there. Okay, what is the soul? You are not just a self, you are a soul. I'll let you read more of that as you get into the soul keeping, but know that we are what's known as integrated beings. All of our parts are not separate, but there is a flow between them. It is all part of the whole person. The whole person encompasses body, mind, spirit, will. And the will is central in this because it drives the remainder of the self. And this is why self-awareness is so important, and self-care, soul care is so important. The soul is the life center of human beings. The soul is the capacity to integrate all parts into a single whole life. And this is kind of something I say, think about this as a program that runs a computer. You don't usually notice the processes until there's an error. And this is why the ongoing work needs to be happening. Okay, so what is the soul? According to Dallas, the soul seeks harmony, connection, and integration. That's of all of the parts. That's why integrity is such a deep soul word, integral. The human soul seeks to integrate our will and our mind and our body into an integral person. Beyond that, the soul seeks to connect us with other people, with creation, and with God himself, who made us to be rooted in him, the way a tree is rooted by a life-giving stream. So, okay, so what do we know about the soul? What is unhealthy? According to Dallas Willard, it's when a soul is unharmonious, disconnected, disintegrated, or fragmented. And according to my mentors, Rich Plass and Jim Cofield, deformed, deformation. So instead of all of these things melding into the whole, they're split off into separate and unhealthy places. We cannot separate ourselves from our body. We cannot separate ourselves from the spirit. The soul becomes false, living into anything other than what God created that person to be in his image. What are some causes? Causes are trauma, the fall of man, issues with our family of origin, our own sin. How do I identify what's unhealthy or false? Well, a good place to start is to look at your defense mechanisms. Look at when other people are using their defense mechanisms. And when an emotional trigger is bigger than the situation, it's usually not about what's right there in front of you. So if you get into an argument with a coworker about the fax machine, all right, I just dated myself. The scanner, the copy machine, and where the paper should be stacked, it's not about the paper. It's about something else. And this is where you got to stop yourself and say, okay, is the paper organization that important? Why is that important? Why am I reacting this way to something that's really not going to make much difference in the scope of eternity, right? These are the questions we've got to be asking ourselves. Okay. Let's see far back. All right. So one of the things that, one of the quotes from our text is, the neglected soul doesn't go away, it goes awry. So here's a story I tell from my days at GE. The chicken in the microwave. This is a favorite story, and I would guess that if you ask one of my students in the counseling program, they probably heard the chicken in the microwave. And this is a freebie. If you want to use the chicken in the microwave, you can. So unattended emotions are kind of like a chicken in a microwave. Where does this start? Well, my supervisor when I was in GE customer service was a home economist. And so she started her career with the company testing products. So they had a project where they actually cooked whole chickens in microwaves. And you might be asking yourself, why would they do that? The legs turn out to be rubber. Not the point. You know, as a part of her job, she'd go into Appliance Park and walk to her office every day. So they got this project to see how well you could cook a chicken in the microwave. Well, then, a new project came up. So they shared the data with the company, went on to the next thing. But she had to walk every day through rows and rows of appliances. And a few days after the microwave project, she starts to notice a smell. And she's going, oh, must be a rat, who knows, goes on to her office. But each day, it gets worse. Pretty soon, other people are going, what is that smell? What's going on? And it gets so bad, she finally says, okay, guys, we're going to find this thing. This is, enough's enough. So they go back and they find that they forgot one of the chickens that's been in the microwave all this time. So my point of this is, just because we have pushed our emotions out of sight, just because we have pushed our needs out of sight, and we seem to be going along okay, unprocessed emotions and situations that you don't deal with are still going to deal with you. You might be okay for a while, but eventually it's going to start to stink. And so here's another less delicate way to say we have to do our internal work. That might be on the quiz too, who knows? Okay, so how do we take care of our soul? How do we harmonize, reconnect, reintegrate the spiritual disciplines? And the first of which is Sabbath. In our culture, do we observe Sabbath? In our churches, do we observe Sabbath? What does Scripture define Sabbath as? And what does it look like now in our lives? What did Jesus say about Sabbath? Well, he said the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. So when we get caught up in legalism, then we're just making it more of a chore, one more thing on our list, as opposed to resting, connecting with God, connecting with one another, shutting off electronics. Yeah, that's big. How does this relate to ministering to other souls? Well, if we've not rested, and if God modeled for us 6 days of work and 1 day of rest when he didn't need it, maybe we should pay attention to that. And maybe it's still practical in this day and age. Without rest, we do not have the resources we need to minister to other souls. Oh, there, self-care isn't selfish. There it is again. Okay, so self-care versus soul care. They can be the same. If you don't care for your soul, you're not caring for yourself. But we're going to look when we get into the crisis and trauma counseling text. There'll be a lot more practical things in that. But first and foremost, caring for yourself, connecting with God, and letting him go down into the basement. Okay, so getting into right, there is so much material, so practical, so helpful. I mean, you're even going to find phrases to say in situations. So, this thing you are going to want to keep on your desk. It's great stuff. But he starts off with God's example for us in ministry. First of all, he's going to talk about some scenarios that he ran into early in his experience of ministry. And he's going to describe how things did and didn't go well. I don't want you to choose one of these scenarios for your journal research paper. I'd like you to choose something, again, that's something you've experienced or something you yourself may have been able to put yourself in that place, think about it. But when you read these things, some of these are just gut wrenching, and you will face them. Even if you don't go on in ministry, even if you don't have a career in ministry, you're going to experience these in your own life. You're going to experience these in people that matter to you. Now, the self of the minister or the therapist. This is one of the things that as a therapist that we focus on is, who are you? And how has God gifted you? How are you made unique by God's hand? And how are you gifted in that way? How do you live into who he means for you to be, your true self? Because if you try to operate out of anything other than your true healthy self, then it's going to be false. And it's not going to be effective, because you're not operating with the power of the Holy Spirit. You're operating out of some creation of your own. So the disciplines, again, Richard Foster, Celebration of Discipline. You've got the self disciplines, the service disciplines, the community disciplines, practicing these, but not as a means, an end to it, not as a means to an end, not in and of themselves, but they are practices so that we position ourselves to allow God to transform us, to empower us, to indwell us. So, and Ortberg says you can get just as workaholic about these as anything else. You can be just as legalistic. So be aware of what your beliefs are about certain disciplines. Ministers study their Bible, not for themselves, but for their sermons. Well, do you slow down? Do you take in what God is saying to you? Do you have your time with God? Do you have silence and solitude? Do you just listen? And what does the church say about the disciplines? Pay attention to what your church or your denomination is saying about them. Okay. So the foundation, the example of ministry is Jesus. He demonstrates how to minister in crisis. So when he is ministering to someone, he shows real emotion, solid biblical knowledge. But what most of all does he demonstrate? What are the attributes he demonstrates? He demonstrates compassion, empathy, and he confronts. And so Wright will go into this in greater detail about what it means to help a person in need in the moment, and in some accountability and accepting and taking responsibility for whatever their role may be in the situation. This is where you've got to learn to read the person you're helping. And this is enabled by the Spirit of God. If you're aware of your own defenses, if you're aware of what your triggers are, then you're, forewarned is forearmed if you're doing the spiritual work. And the other part of this is, I'm going to be present to this person. I'm going to be there for them, and I'm going to listen, and I'm going to depend on the Spirit of God and how God has worked in my life, so that I can sense the proper timing to say, okay, what's your part in all this? Okay, describe Jesus's interior life. What were his practices? What did he do that indicates his life was the perfect life? Okay. You have one mouth and two ears. How many times have you heard that one? The first rule of counseling, listen. The first rule of counseling is listen. Sometimes students don't answer that way. The second one is follows right behind that. Never try to counsel your family. When it comes to ministry, you've got to have permission from your family to minister to them. Or you could end up like Jesus did when he went back to his hometown and he said, okay, I'm not doing any miracles here because these people are hard-hearted. And then he said, a prophet's not welcome in his own home. All right, now think about this. Think about a time when you were sharing something with someone and you really felt heard. How did they do that? How did they help you feel heard? What attributes are needed to do those things? Okay. Describe a time when you did not feel heard. Think about a time when you didn't feel heard. Now, if I feel heard, I'm listening, I'm asking questions, I'm curious, and I'm compassionate. I have empathy. That other person didn't say, well, here's what you should do. That's a time when you don't feel heard. My heart is breaking over my son's choice. Well, you should just cut him out of the will. Don't think I was asking that. See the difference? My son is breaking my heart. Oh, I'm so sorry. How can I pray for you? Is there something I can do to help? Do you just need company? Big difference. What are the barriers to feeling heard? Why do you think people responded the way they did when they weren't listening? Go back to those defense mechanisms and think too, if someone's angry, or remember, if an emotional response is bigger than what the situation calls for, then it's about something else. So keep that on your radar. Okay, why did they go so big and loud over that? When you're in ministry, you're going to have that. And that's when you're going to go, whoa, I just asked this question. Okay, we hit a nerve somewhere. Let's slow down and let's lean in and listen. Okay, so empathy. How do you recognize it? It's pretty obvious, isn't it? When somebody really cares, when they just lean in closer. Wright is going to go into that a lot deeper, have a lot of helpful practical things that you can do. And then at the right time, having the courage to confront. When we're too soft, we're not being kind. When we're too hard, we're being unkind. There's a window that you operate within for that. Now, the most crucial element needed to help further after the initial crisis is under control, the dust settles, things begin to calm out. That's when truth starts with a T, ends with a T. Truth. Actually, it doesn't end with a T. All right, there's the bibliography. So we're finished with presentation for this week. Again, don't hesitate to contact me. If you've got a question, if you have a concern, remember it's better in writing because I might be somewhere else in a meeting, in a session, but I will be accessible to you. All right, I'm so glad you chose this course, and we'll talk again next week.